The second hand stops. Not forever. Not long enough for the world to notice. Just long enough for the person watching it to feel a quiet disturbance, a hesitation in the room, as if the machinery behind ordinary life has missed a beat. The clock is still there. The light is still falling across the wall. Somewhere outside, traffic moves. A refrigerator hums. A dog barks at nothing. But for 2 or 3 seconds, time seems less like a river and more like something fragile, something being held in place. Most of us dismiss these moments. We blink, laugh softly, and tell ourselves the mind is tired. That is usually the reasonable answer. Yet across history, science, aviation records, old photographs, quantum experiments, and personal memory, there are stories that keep circling the same impossible question. What if time is not as smooth as we were taught? Not broken in the loud cinematic sense, not shattered like glass, but slightly uneven, interrupted, stretched, replayed, misread by consciousness, or perhaps by reality itself. Tonight, we follow 10 strange traces of what some call time glitches. Some are psychological, some are legends. Some come from serious scientific experiments. None gives us a final answer. But together, they ask something quietly profound. If time can bend, pause, or deceive us, how much of our lives have we truly understood? It begins with something almost too ordinary to be mysterious. A clock on a wall. Many people have experienced a strange effect when they suddenly look at an analog clock. The second hand appears frozen, suspended in place longer than a second should allow. Then, without ceremony, it resumes its movement. This sensation is known in psychology as chronostasis, a word that sounds clinical enough to remove the wonder from it. The usual explanation is that the brain fills in a small gap when the eyes make a quick movement. In that instant, perception edits reality so smoothly that we mistake a reconstruction for a continuous moment. That explanation is elegant. It is also unsettling, because it means our experience of time is not a direct recording. It is assembled. The mind cuts, blends, repairs, and stabilizes the world before we ever become aware of it. What feels like the present may already be a finished product, a delicate film spliced together behind the eyes. The frozen clock may not be evidence that the universe paused. It may be evidence that we do. And if our own perception can create a false second so convincingly, then every stranger story about time must begin with humility. Before we ask whether reality has glitches, we have to ask whether consciousness is one of them. The next case moves from the private mind to public footage, where the evidence looks harder to dismiss, but maybe even more difficult to trust. A security camera watches without blinking. Its world is made of corners, tiled floors, parking lots, stairwells, and people passing through frames without knowing they are being preserved. Over the last 2 decades, countless clips have circulated online showing pedestrians who seem to vanish for a fraction of a second, only to appear several feet away. A person walks behind a passing vehicle and never emerges where expected. A figure crosses a hallway, flickers, then reappears in a slightly different position. To viewers, these moments feel like dropped stitches in the fabric of everyday life. But cameras are not neutral witnesses. They compress, skip frames, struggle with low light, and turn motion into digital fragments. A missing frame can become a mystery. A reflection can become a ghost. A compression artifact can look like a person slipping between seconds. Still, the emotional power of these images is hard to ignore. They disturb us because cameras were supposed to make reality more certain. A human memory can be doubted. A witness can be mistaken. But video carries the authority of machinery. When the machine seems confused, we feel the ground shift beneath us. The real question may not be whether these clips prove disappearance. The deeper question is why we are so ready to believe a camera has caught something our senses were never meant to see. And once machines begin to fail as witnesses, the mystery moves outward, from hallways and parking lots into open sky. Over the ocean, there are moments when distance stops behaving like distance. One of the most famous stories connected to time disturbance comes from pilot Bruce Gernon, who described flying near the Bermuda Triangle through a strange electronic fog. According to his account, the cloud seemed to form around his aircraft. Instruments behaved oddly, and a flight that should have taken longer appeared to cover roughly 100 miles in an unusually short span. To some, the story suggests a kind of atmospheric tunnel, a fold in space and time. To others, it remains an unusual flight account shaped by weather, memory, and interpretation. The Bermuda Triangle has always been a place where maps invite imagination. Warm water, sudden storms, magnetic variation, heavy traffic, and human error have all contributed to its reputation. Yet the sea gives mystery a special kind of silence. Wreckage disappears. Radio calls fade. The horizon offers no witnesses. Science does allow time to bend, but not in the casual way legends prefer. Einstein showed that gravity and velocity can affect time, though under conditions far beyond an ordinary flight through clouds. That makes the story difficult to accept literally, but not easy to forget. Because every pilot knows the strange intimacy of flying alone through weather. Instruments become more than tools. They become a fragile agreement between the human body and the vastness around it. When that agreement falters, even briefly, the sky can feel less like empty space than a locked door left slightly open. Sometimes the disturbance is not seen on a clock or a camera. It arrives as memory. Deja vu is usually brief. A doorway, a sentence, a smell of rain on pavement, and suddenly the present feels borrowed from somewhere else. The mind whispers, "This has happened before." Most episodes pass in seconds. But some people describe a deeper version, a sense that an entire day is unfolding along a track already traveled. The same phone call, the same red car at the intersection, the same joke told at the same kitchen table with the same pause before laughter. Neurology offers several possible explanations. Memory systems can misfire. Familiarity can attach itself to a new moment. The brain can create the emotional signature of recognition without retrieving an actual memory. In that sense, déjà vu may be a small mismatch between experience and interpretation. Yet emotionally, it feels larger than a misfire. It feels as if the self has briefly stepped outside the ordinary direction of life. For an instant, we are not only living the moment, but remembering it while it happens. That is why people often describe déjà vu with unease rather than curiosity. It makes the present feel less free. If you have ever experienced a déjà vu so vivid that it stayed with you, you know the quiet aftershock it leaves. And that aftershock prepares us for a more elaborate legend. A story not of one repeated moment, but of an entire aircraft said to have landed decades late. The story of Flight 914 begins like an old newspaper clipping left in a drawer. According to the legend, a Pan-American aircraft took off from New York in 1955 bound for Miami, then vanished from ordinary records. Decades later, the tale says, it appeared over Caracas, Venezuela in 1992, its crew confused, its passengers unaware that nearly 40 years had passed. The image is unforgettable. A silver aircraft descending from another era, carrying people dressed for the 1950s into a world of different music, different politics, different children grown old. There is no reliable evidence that this event happened as described. The story is widely treated as an urban legend, repeated because it speaks to something powerful rather than because it rests on a firm historical record. But legends survive for a reason. They give shape to fears we do not know how to file away. Commercial aviation depends on schedules, departures, arrivals, flight paths, radio contact, fuel calculations. It is one of the modern world's great rituals of controlled time. A plane that disappears from time itself is a violation of that ritual. It asks what happens when the system designed to conquer distance is swallowed by the one force it cannot outrun. The responsible answer is that Flight 914 belongs to folklore. Yet folklore can still reveal a truth about us. We fear not only death or disappearance, we fear returning to find that time continued without us. At the midpoint of this journey, the question changes. Until now, the stories have sounded like errors in experience. A clock seems frozen, a camera drops frames, a pilot misreads distance, memory bends back on itself, a legend imagines passengers displaced by decades. These are haunting, but they remain close to the human scale. Then quantum physics enters the room, and the mystery becomes stranger because it no longer depends on folklore. The delayed choice quantum eraser is often misunderstood, and it deserves care. In simplified terms, experiments involving particles of light suggest that the way information is measured can affect whether those particles appear to behave like waves or like individual objects. Some interpretations make it seem as though a measurement made later changes how the particle behaved earlier. That phrase, changing the past, is too strong if spoken carelessly. The actual science is more subtle, mathematical, and debated. Still, even in careful language, the result unsettles common sense. At the quantum scale, nature does not seem eager to give us a tidy story of before and after. Information, observation, probability, and measurement are tangled in ways that our everyday minds struggle to visualize. The past may not be a simple archive sitting untouched behind us. It may be connected to the present more delicately than we imagined. This is the turn. The mystery is no longer only whether people misperceive time. It is whether time itself, at its deepest level, is less fixed than ordinary life allows us to believe. An ancient bronze mechanism lies at the bottom of the sea, corroded by salt and silence. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck near a Greek island, is one of the most astonishing technological artifacts of the ancient world. Its interlocking gears were capable of modeling astronomical cycles with a sophistication that once seemed out of place for its era. It is not evidence of time travel. It is evidence of something perhaps more humbling, that the past was more intelligent, more inventive, and more mechanically ambitious than modern people once assumed. Objects like this are often called out-of-place artifacts, though that phrase can mislead. Some examples cited in popular mystery culture are poorly documented or exaggerated, including claims of human footprints beside dinosaur tracks. Others, like Antikythera, are real and extraordinary precisely because they force historians to revise assumptions without abandoning reason. The emotional effect is similar to a time glitch. We look at an ancient object and feel a rupture between expectation and evidence. The past reaches forward with a hand more skilled than we expected, and for a moment, history feels less like a staircase than a room full of locked doors. Maybe the mystery is not that someone traveled backward with advanced knowledge. Maybe it is that we underestimate what people before us could see, build, and calculate. Yet once we admit that history contains forgotten levels of complexity, another possibility appears. How many sophisticated moments have vanished completely, leaving only fragments that arrive too late to be easily understood? A ship vanishes from radar for 10 minutes, and when it returns, its clocks are 10 minutes behind. That is the shape of a story told in connection with a Soviet icebreaker in the 1970s. Details vary, and the evidence remains difficult to verify. In some versions, the vessel disappears from monitoring systems in polar waters, then reappears with every clock aboard lagging behind the outside world by the exact duration of its absence. It is the kind of account that lives in the borderland between maritime rumor and Cold War atmosphere. The setting matters. The polar sea is already a landscape of distortion, white horizons, magnetic uncertainty, radio interference, storms that erase distance, ice fields that grind against steel like slow machinery. During the Cold War, secrecy added another layer. Military records, scientific expeditions, and state silence created fertile ground for stories that could never fully be confirmed or dismissed. A cautious reading sees equipment failure, reporting gaps, or later embellishment. A more speculative reading imagines a pocket of altered time, a place where the ship did not merely lose contact, but lost synchronization with the world. What gives the story power is its precision. 10 missing minutes, 10 minutes on the clocks, Numbers make a legend feel less like mist and more like an instrument reading. And yet a number can be a lure. It invites us toward certainty before evidence is ready to follow. The next phenomenon is even larger because it does not involve one clock, one ship, or one witness. It involves the sky itself. At noon, the world should not blink. Yet there are scattered modern accounts of what people call sky flashes or global flickers, brief moments when daylight seems to dim, or the entire sky appears to switch off and return almost instantly. Sometimes the reports come from a single neighborhood. Sometimes people online discover that others, far away, noticed something similar. The descriptions are simple and unnerving. 1 second of darkness, then ordinary light. There are natural explanations worth considering before reaching for cosmic ones. Passing clouds can be abrupt. Electrical perception can be affected by migraine, fatigue, or retinal afterimages. A bird, aircraft, or shadow near a window can create the impression of a whole world flicker. In some cases, surveillance cameras capture sudden exposure shifts that make daylight appear to fail. Still, the metaphor is difficult to resist. A sky that flickers feels like the ceiling of reality revealing its wiring. This is where the idea of a simulated universe often enters the conversation, not as proof, but as a modern myth shaped by modern technology. Earlier generations imagined omens, spirits, or divine signs. We imagine rendering errors, buffering, and system resets. Every age gives the unknown a vocabulary drawn from its machines. The sky flash may be weather, optics, or neurology, but it asks a deeper cultural question. When reality behaves strangely, do we seek truth, or do we translate mystery into the language we already know? That question leads beyond Earth, to instruments built to look backward through time itself. The James Webb Space Telescope does not merely look into space, it looks into age. When its golden mirrors gathered light from the early universe, astronomers expected to see young galaxies gradually assembling themselves after the Big Bang. Instead, some observations appeared to show galaxies that were surprisingly massive, structured, or mature for such an early cosmic period. The phrase often used in public discussion is that they seemed too old for the universe. Scientists are still working through the data, refining distances, masses, models, and assumptions. This is not evidence that time glitched in the literal sense. It is something more scientifically valuable, a tension between observation and expectation. For a working scientist, that tension is not silence. It is the beginning of labor. Instruments improve. Models are challenged. Measurements are checked. The universe resists our timelines, and we revise them. That is how knowledge moves, not by protecting certainty, but by letting difficult evidence disturb it. There is something beautiful about this. A galaxy whose light traveled for billions of years reaches a telescope near Earth and quietly asks whether our story is complete. It does not accuse. It does not explain itself. It simply appears, ancient and faint, carrying information from a time before the sun existed. If there is a time glitch here, it may be in our confidence. We thought we knew the pace at which cosmic structure should emerge. The universe answered with a slower, older voice, and the conversation is still unfolding. Every mystery in this story has a human hand near it. A hand points at a frozen clock. A hand scrubs through security footage. A pilot grips the controls inside a cloud. A passenger legend survives because someone retells it. A scientist aligns optical equipment to ask particles how they behave. An archaeologist brushes corrosion from ancient gears. An astronomer studies a smudge of red light from the edge of time. We often speak of time as if it were outside us, a cold dimension through which we are carried. But our experience of time is intimate. It is the sound of a parent's voice aging. It is a child's face changing in photographs. It is the empty chair at a holiday table. It is the strange way a decade can disappear behind us while one difficult afternoon refuses to end. That may be why stories of time glitches hold such force. They are not only puzzles. They are emotional rebellions against the finality of sequence. If time can pause, maybe loss can wait. If time can repeat, maybe choices can be remade. If time can fold, maybe distance between the living and the past is not absolute. Science cannot give those hopes easy permission, but it can teach us wonder without surrendering judgment. The fragile evidence remains fragile. The legends remain legends. The experiments remain precise and limited. Yet the longing beneath them is real, and it leads us toward a more careful kind of awe. A strange pattern begins to appear when the 10 cases are placed side by side. The weakest evidence often produces the strongest emotion. The viral clip, the missing flight, the ship with delayed clocks, the flickering sky. These stories are vivid because they resemble scenes from a life we could imagine entering. The strongest science, by contrast, is quieter. Quantum measurement does not look dramatic. Early galaxies do not flash across the sky for the naked eye. Ancient gears do not speak unless someone spends years learning how to listen. This contrast matters. Mystery is not the enemy of truth, but mystery can be shaped by desire. We want the world to reveal itself in visible signs: a clock stopping, a plane arriving from the past, a shadow crossing the sun. Real discovery is often less theatrical. It arrives as data points, calibration problems, careful disagreement, and patient revision. Yet the emotional truth of these stories should not be dismissed. They remind us that reality is not fully domesticated. The everyday world is stable enough to trust, but not simple enough to exhaust. Time remains one of the deepest structures in physics and one of the most mysterious experiences in consciousness. Between skepticism and wonder, there is a narrow path worth walking. On that path, we do not have to pretend every legend is true. We also do not have to pretend that every unanswered question is meaningless. The final step is not to decide whether time is broken, but to ask why the possibility moves us so deeply. Return now to the clock. The second hand moves again. The room resumes its ordinary rhythm. Nothing has visibly changed. And yet, after passing through frozen seconds, vanishing figures, electronic fog, déjà vu, urban legends, quantum puzzles, ancient mechanisms, polar rumors, flickering skies, and ancient galaxies, the clock no longer feels quite as simple as it did before. Maybe time is not malfunctioning. Maybe the glitches belong to perception, memory, instruments, storytelling, and the limits of interpretation. That would not make the mystery smaller. It would make it more human. We are creatures who measure the universe with clocks, cameras, telescopes, equations, and fragile recollections. Every tool extends us, and every tool can mislead us. Still, a deeper humility remains. We live inside time, but we do not stand outside it. We cannot hold it at arm's length like an object under glass. We know it by aging, waiting, remembering, discovering, and losing. We know it through the slow light of galaxies and the quick shock of a second that seems to last too long. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is not that time is broken, or that reality is a machine with visible errors. Perhaps it is that the universe is stranger than our metaphors, and our lives are brief enough that even ordinary moments deserve attention. The next time a clock appears to hesitate, pause with it. Not because it proves a crack in reality, but because it reminds us that certainty is fragile, wonder is still possible, and time, whatever it truly is, has never fully belonged to us.